WWE has made another announcement, but this one is a huge announcement, and I'm actually relatively shocked by this announcement because I didn't think WWE would actually have the guts to do it. Now, as you guys know, WrestleMania weekend is a big weekend for WWE. And for years, it's always been tradition that WWE NXT would have a show on the weekend. Before it used to be TakeOver, now it's Stand and Deliver. But WWE has made a major announcement. And that change is coming this year. Now, Shawn Michaels actually revealed on a video today that WWE is, in fact, moving Stand and Deliver to its own time away from WrestleMania weekend. The show will take place on April 4th in St. Louis, Missouri, and it will be taking place at the new factory at the district in St. Louis. So this is obviously like a newer venue. Shawn Michaels, who runs NXT, made the announcement. And this is a huge change, right? This is not being affiliated with WrestleMania weekend. It's not taking place at the same time as WrestleMania weekend. It's doing its own thing away from WrestleMania. Which this is probably going to be heavily debated, but I'm actually okay with this. I think there's always been so much value, more bang for your buck when you could go to NXT during WrestleMania weekend. But man, these last few years, ever since WWE started doing 2-night WrestleManias, it's like been unfair to the fans to wake up early in the morning, go to NXT, and then they have to go and rush to get to WrestleMania night one. Yeah, I don't like it. It's not really, it sounds like a logistical nightmare, to be honest. It sounds like a logistical nightmare. And for WWE, if you're trying to build NXT up as its own brand, which I think they are more confident that NXT could do well with selling tickets on its own. But if you want NXT to have its own brand and its own identity, this is the kind of decision that you have to do. This is exactly what you have to do. And WWE is still kind of being smart because on April 3rd, WWE SmackDown will also take place from Enterprise Center in St. Louis. So when people go to SmackDown, they're probably more inclined to go to NXT the next night anyways. It's just the fact that this is no longer surrounded by WrestleMania weekend as a whole. And I think some people will debate me on this, and I think some people will have a disagreement with me on this, which is completely fine. But I just think it was such a logistical nightmare that wasn't a good thing for fans. I know for me, when I went to WrestleMania 34, going to an NXT TakeOver or going to a Raw or a SmackDown, there was just so much that I ended up doing. It was a nightmare to begin with. And quite frankly, I'm not a big fan of that. I feel like actually, strangely enough, the older I get, the more I tend to hate traveling. So that's kind of odd. I've traveled a lot in my life, and I feel like I start to hate travel more. So if you add travel time plus Las Vegas, you got to be considerate of the fact that Las Vegas is a tourist spot, casinos, restaurants, bars, things of that nature. If somebody's going out to party or to enjoy the nightly festivities or other entertainment things that may not even have anything to do with wrestling, because keep in mind, in Las Vegas, you're going to have wrestling shows, but there's also, these concerts and magic trick shows, and there's a whole bunch going on, right? So you have to be mindful of that on a Friday night, and then you go on and watch SmackDown, whatever. Then after that, you go to sleep and you got to wake up really early. Like, it's a nightmare. I don't think I would be down for that. And I'm kind of glad to see that WWE is pivoting away from that experience. Now, the real question is WWE NXT really ready? I mean, just a few minutes ago, I alluded to the fact that I think WWE is confident that NXT is ready to stand on its own. To a certain extent, I'm not 100% convinced that to be true. I think NXT is a very strong brand. I think NXT has its audience. I think NXT being at, WrestleMania weekend probably would have suffered ticket sales. I think this allows them to do fine with ticket sales. So there is that benefit. But I don't know if NXT has a strong enough roster to truly stand on its own. And the reason why I say that is because most of the people have already got called up to the main roster or are getting called up to the main roster. So that is one way that I'm kind of looking at it, but it's okay. I mean, I feel like you kind of relieved some of the pressure off of their backs to go out and perform at WrestleMania weekend when everybody else, their whole attention isn't necessarily on NXT. So for that reason, I like this move. I think it's a huge announcement. I actually didn't expect WWE to do this, and I was kind of weirded out by the fact that WWE had yet to announce anything, because usually they announce things so much ahead of time. And I thought for WrestleMania weekend, WWE was really trying to. I feel like they were really trying to make a big spark this year. And listen, by the way, if you're asking people to go to NXT, Raw, SmackDown, Hall of Fame, this, that, and the access, that's a very expensive trip. And if WWE WrestleMania tickets are on the down, yeah, let's try not and make it more expensive, right? I think that's another argument that should probably be made. So definitely something to consider there. All right, and that brings us to our next topic. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk about this because Bronson Reed got injured on Monday Night Raw. Some people even thought this was a work, which, fascinating enough, you can never really trust WWE now, right? We've seen what's happened with Seth Rollins and the injuries and working angles. I think if you look at the footage, it looks legitimate. So I'm not one of those people questioning if this is a work or not. But yes, there are fans questioning whether or not Bronson Reed's injury was a work. Now, with that being said, there was a new report that came out that essentially confirmed the injury. Following the injury on Monday Night Raw, Bronson Reed was immediately sent to Birmingham, Alabama to undergo surgery for torn biceps. This was reported by PW Insider. Now, because the show took place in Atlanta, there was a little bit of an advantage of getting him to go to Birmingham. I guess it's a little bit of a shorter drive, so this allowed him to go and get there quickly, get the procedure. And the belief is that he's already undergone surgery. Now, there isn't a timetable for his return. WWE is clearly screwed here when it comes to the Vision. Whatever their original plans were, I don't even know. I know at one point there was even a report that Bronson Reed was expected to win that match. I think Jey Uso kind of made that obvious in the match. But the whole Vision thing is like really screwed right now. Braun Breaker out. Bronson Reed out. Seth Rollins is out. The creative plans for WrestleMania are probably being changed as we speak. And with the torn bicep, is Bronson Reed in a position where he's going to be out for a very long time? We don't even know. I'm not a doctor. But you can assume there is a likelihood that he could potentially miss WrestleMania. That's not a guarantee, but there is that potential possibility. And of course, we don't even know what the original plans were for WrestleMania. WWE has been put in such a tricky spot here. And to be fair, this is like a big deal because the Vision is such a big deal for WWE programming. I don't know what Triple H and the creative team are going to be doing. I don't know what they're going to be working on. It's a very tricky spot for them. And part of me wonders if they're going to pivot to something with Logan Paul and Austin Theory tag teaming. I think that's a possibility. I think, we have seen this masked man attack the Vision, and I've kind of been under the assumption that eventually would reveal Seth Rollins. I don't know what else to expect here, but maybe they will have to change even that reveal to something else. And who knows, man? Who knows? WWE, they have their back against the wall here. You're going into WrestleMania 42. Ticket sales are down. WWE Raw is kind of on the decline. A lot of people weren't too happy with this week's episode. In my personal opinion, I feel like with WWE's back against the wall here, the best thing they can do is look at some of these other guys that are ready to assume the role. I think Rusev is a great person they could be pushing right now. Aleister Black is another great person they could be pushing right now. Dragon Lee. Hell, if you're the WWE, you got Ethan Page who just dropped the North American Championship. Call him up to the Vision. Like, let's have some fun with this. Let's go crazy. Let's call an audible that can spruce up the whole product. And you never know what that might be, but it is important that WWE figures it out, because the Vision is not some sort of like C-tier storyline. It was a storyline that I believe, I was under the impression it's been utilized or it's been done to utilize Braun Breaker as the next top star. And we just got to wait and see what happens. But it is such a pain in the ass. And, we saw AEW kind of have the similar situation with All In and some of these pay-per-views where top talent are getting injured and they have to change plans. And sometimes it works out for the better, sometimes it doesn't. But I think for AEW and WWE, it's really, really important that sometimes you take risk. When injuries happen to your top stars or to your top storylines, and those top storylines are impacted, man, I think you got to pivot, and I think you got to go and take the risk and do something different. You know what I'm saying? And who knows? Like, obviously, this could even impact LA Knight. And that's a very interesting part because a lot of people were wondering what was LA Knight's original plans. Now there's rumors of LA Knight versus Brock Lesnar. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that match, but him and Cody did eliminate Brock Lesnar. I don't know. It is so weird. It is so strange, but we'll have to wait and see. Cody Rhodes, man, this guy is already talking about his retirement plans. And, AJ Styles talked about his retirement plans a year before. John Cena talked about his retirement plans a year before. Now, I don't think Cody Rhodes is retiring in a year, but Cody Rhodes was on ESPN. He was on the show Unsportsmanlike, and he clarified specifically that he doesn't have a set firm retirement plan or date. However, he is pretty certain when his career will end. And he did officially say, I don't have an end date like I used to, but I do know that whatever the next deal I sign with WWE, which, by the way, I'm not going anywhere, that next deal will be my last deal. That's what Cody Rhodes said on ESPN. Now, Cody Rhodes is one of my favorites. Cody Rhodes, what a career this man has had. And it's always interesting when you factor in the fact that Cody Rhodes started AEW with Tony Khan and the Elite. But then he left AEW and joined the WWE and truly took a gamble on himself and basically became the company's quarterback one, QB1. What is WWE's plan for when Cody Rhodes leaves the company? Who is going to assume that position? Should WWE panic? Because when Cody Rhodes is gone, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. You could even argue that a lot of these sellouts and a lot of these accomplishments that WWE currently has, I think you can pretty much guarantee that Cody Rhodes was a very, very, very big part of that. Now, of course, so is Roman Reigns. So is Jey Uso. So is Seth Rollins. I mean, there's a plethora of guys also responsible, but it is a very clear indicator that Cody Rhodes is very responsible for some of WWE's success. And his next WWE contract, would it be a 5-year deal? Would it be a 3-year deal? Would it be a 2-year deal? Hell, would it be a 6-month deal? We don't really know. But we know Cody Rhodes is talking about his retirement plans, and we know he's got one contract left. So now the question kind of shifts to who would step up in place of Cody Rhodes if Cody Rhodes were to leave the company. Does WWE currently have that person on the roster right now? For so long, the conversation has been, who is the next John Cena? Quite frankly, there is no next John Cena, and in my humble opinion, there is no new Cody Rhodes. It's going to be about the brand itself. Just like the UFC is not dependent on one talent, the WWE is no longer dependent on one talent. Now, thankfully, WWE has a lot of great talent on their roster. Really, they really, really do, which is awesome. It's a great thing to see. And because of this, I don't think they have to panic when Cody retires, but I think they need to be prepared for when Cody retires. Braun Breaker, in my opinion, could be that ultimate babyface. But his strong work also comes in the form of a heel turn. So Braun Breaker, you never really know what WWE's plan could be there. that is something that you have to consider. But I do think there is some beauty in the fact that their roster is so stacked that I do think WWE will be okay once Cody Rhodes departs the company. But then what would Cody Rhodes' next move within the company look like? We know he has that executive power experience in AEW. Could TKO bring in Cody Rhodes as an advisor for NXT, as a coach, as a producer? Obviously, Cody Rhodes has his podcast. So you know TKO and fanatics love Cody Rhodes doing the podcast. It's just something interesting to think about. What about Shawn Michaels in NXT? He's doing a pretty great job in NXT. But who would run NXT after Shawn Michaels? Are we at the stage where we need to start thinking about that? Because maybe Cody Rhodes is that guy. And if you're Cody Rhodes, maybe that's something you should consider. Maybe it would be nice to see Cody run NXT. I don't know if that's even a likelihood or if it's a possibility, but it would be something really cool. Cody is a legend, in my opinion. Cody completely transitioned and turned around his entire career after leaving WWE and Stardust behind. And when he went to Japan, when he went to Ring of Honor and TNA, when he went to the Indies, when he went to AEW, and when he came back, I mean, this guy is a whole different Cody Rhodes. And being the son of Dusty Rhodes, you kind of expect that. But man, what a great thing to see. And it kind of sucks. Like, a lot of my favorites are starting to retire. And we're kind of at the stage where we're seeing this new era really transition into a, newer crowd and newer, like, it's a newer style audience, but then also a newer performers, Oba Femi and Javon Evans and so much and blah, like, oh my God, dude. Very interesting stuff, to say the least. Okay, now we got to talk about Karrion Kross potentially coming to JCW. Okay, interesting, because we've seen Karrion Kross go to MLW. We haven't seen him in TNA. We haven't seen him in AEW. And we sure as hell haven't seen him return to WWE. Now, Vince Russo, he was on the Coach and Bro show this week, and he was talking about the possibility of Karrion Kross joining JCW. He also spoke about the possibility of Shotzi as well as Scarlett joining JCW. Now, Vince Russo, interestingly enough, controversial in many ways. A lot of people tend to believe that he's a grifter. A lot of people tend to believe that he is just trying to, steal headlines, whatever it may be. He talks about this on the show, and he says Shotzi would be great at JCW. And Karrion Kross and I have talked several times, and I wouldn't say that's out of the picture. Now, keep in mind, Vince Russo is one that is helping run the creative direction for JCW Lunacy. And JCW is starting to really get some attention on social media and YouTube. I have been given plenty of comments over the last month or so about JCW. People have asked me to check it out. I have. And I support it. I support more wrestling, dude. I support more wrestling. And what's interesting about JCW is it's one of the indies that actually has relatively good production. Not great production, but it's good enough. And it's free and accessible on YouTube. And they've had a variety of big names on the shows. If Karrion Kross does not return to WWE, if he doesn't show up in AEW, and if he doesn't show up in TNA, then I have no problem with seeing Karrion Kross in MLW, in NWA, in CMLL, in Maple Leaf Pro, in JCW, GCW. Like, I have no problem with him taking that route in his career. You could still have a very sustainable career without having to work for a major wrestling company. So I believe Karrion Kross should be on national TV. I would welcome the idea of him being in AEW or WWE. But if you want some of these smaller companies to gain traction, you got to have some key names. And I do believe Karrion Kross is considered a key name. So the idea of Karrion Kross coming to JCW is not something I'd be against or opposed to in any capacity. In any capacity. And I want to be really clear. I don't know about the financial status of JCW and how it works in terms of the financials and what they're able to afford and not able to afford. Obviously, they got something going right now, which is apparently pretty positive. It seems like people are relatively responding positively to JCW lunacy. And like I said, I really don't mind it. I don't think it's a bad show or a great show. I think it's just solid wrestling, right? And I think that's a good thing for professional wrestling. So I would like to see some of these smaller companies maybe even get more financial backings to make these kind of signings happen. And, listen, if you really want to see a company grow and potentially improve their production and get a TV deal and things of that nature, I think you have to be cognizant of the idea that it requires a solid roster. So the idea of Karrion Kross and Shotzi Blackheart, Scarlett joining JCW would be actually kind of cool. And I do agree 1,000,000% that Shotzi would fit extremely well in JCW as well. And it's a good sign of what is to come in the professional wrestling world that not every person needs to go to AEW or WWE. I think that is such a great thing because two companies ran by billionaires, they have endless money. Some of these other companies, I feel like, fuel the growth of indie wrestling. And I think pre-pandemic, indie wrestling was so big. I've been kind of worried that it may never get back to where it was. But I feel a little bit more confident now, thanks to companies like Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, thanks to companies like JCW, GCW, MLW. Yeah, it's a good thing to see. And it's one of those things I definitely support. So we'll definitely see what happens. Whether we get 3 new signings to JCW, we'll ultimately we'll find out soon. But Vince Russo is talking about it, and since he runs creative for the company, you have to wonder if there's actually more meat on the bone with this one. And that brings us to our final topic, ladies and gentlemen. We need to talk about this. An AEW star has suddenly been pulled off of AEW Dynamite and indie events, and there's a pretty big reason for it. Now, with that being said, according to PWInsider.com, Eddie Kingston has been dealing with severe migraine headaches and is prioritizing his health, and therefore he has been forced to withdraw from multiple commitments that include appearances also outside of AEW. Now, we know that he was scheduled to be doing some stuff with AEW. He's not going to be appearing at AEW Dynamite tonight in Denver, which means he also won't be part of the Collision tapings. There's also some stuff that was scheduled between him and Ortiz. However, organizers on X also confirmed that he will no longer be participating. The clear reason for this is medical. Refunds are being processed, that sort of thing. And listen, man, Eddie Kingston's literally one of my favorites in AEW. Everybody knows this. I've been super, super, super open and honest about this. I think Eddie Kingston is such an enjoyable person to watch. He is somebody that I really think is talented. He's a great promo. He's not a typical pro wrestler. He's old school in many ways. I'm a very big fan of the guy. And I just feel like in the last year or two, health-wise, things haven't been that great for him. I want to see Eddie Kingston back on TV. I want to see Eddie Kingston back in AEW in a prominent role. But unfortunately, if the health isn't there, you cannot take that risk. Especially when you look at severe migraines. You got to look at severe migraines as an actual thing of like concern. Anything that has to deal with head and concussions, migraines, headaches, things of that nature. There's a lot of things that could be misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, and you don't want to see that happen. And I'm such a big fan of Eddie Kingston. I just hope health-wise everything checks out because I really do enjoy watching his work. I really do. And I think when I see a guy like Eddie Kingston miss TV, it's always sad and it sucks because I do think he makes the product better in many ways. But if his health isn't there, man, you got to take care of yourself. You got to get that taken care of. So the fact that he's been pulled off of AEW TV, the fact that he's being pulled from these other commitments, it's a sign that it's being taken seriously, which I appreciate. And just as a fan of professional wrestling, I've said this so many times on this channel, and I will say this until the very, very end, until I can no longer make videos on this channel, until I'm done with YouTube, which I never plan on being done with to begin with, but I will always prioritize the health over wealth. I think that is such a big deal. I think it is so easy for us to be so invested in the wrestling shows and the characters and things of that nature. People are great heels, people are great baby faces, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, these people are human too, and you cannot forget that. And I don't let the entertainment world or the sports world defer me away from that. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that health is important. And Eddie Kingston is one of those guys where he's just one of my favorites, man. He's literally one of my favorites, and I would rather see him on TV healthy and ready to go. And it sucks because he just came back recently, but it is what it is, and that's how it's going to be. And hopefully it all gets taken care of, and hopefully there's no more concern. Hopefully this is something very minimal. But for him to be pulled off of TV and from other commitments, obviously it's serious enough where they know they have to, which is a good thing. And I'd like to see them being proactive than versus not being proactive. And yeah. So a lot of big things happening in the world of professional wrestling, guys, and I'm going to keep you updated. I appreciate you all for coming through and watching these videos. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button and ring that bell, and I will see you guys next time.